No Jaws music? We'll get it next week. So how you guys doing? Yeah? Even with this freezing cold weather. Gosh. I had to scrape frost off my window. Can you imagine? You know, I do feel sorry for the people shoveling snow, but I gotta say, Naples has its own set of issues. And we've been down here for 6 months. And in the first 3 weeks, my husband was chased by a 400-pound black bear on our road. Well, chase is a little exaggerating, but they had a stare down. It was pretty intense. Then I had what kind of snake was that? Cottonmouth. And I wanted to kill it. I was in my car. It was right going across where my kids play, right in the street. So I stepped on the gas and I got it, but I didn't see it behind me anywhere. And I was just like, so sometimes my mind can get a little bit crazy. And I thought it got wrapped up in my wheel and threw up into my engine. So I'm driving, but I'm driving with such intense fear of revenge is on its mind. And it's going to crawl, like your mind just starts taking away. It's going to crawl up through my engine and get by my foot in the gas pedal. It's coming for my foot. So I'm trying to drive and I'm just freaking. So finally I pull the car over and I'm looking underneath and I'm looking I can't find it anywhere. So I just pray, God, just protect me and help this snake not to, like a snake has that mind. Like, I knew you ran me over. I'm going to come bite your foot. But it's just, whatever. So this week, one of my dear friends, and this is true, all true stories, and she's here, Deanna. She can vouch for me, most because, I can exaggerate things, but this is no exaggeration. We went to lunch one day, and we were on, what is it, Third? Okay, so we're on 3rd Street, and we get out of the car, and it's such a beautiful day. And I literally, she made me dress up. I don't like to dress up. So she's like, I had to try to find a skirt in my closet somewhere. And so, but I got out of the car and I was like, I even did a twirl. I go, this day is so beautiful. This is awesome. And I was like, which sidewalk do you want to walk on? And she's like, oh, we'll take this one. So we take 3 steps, maybe. Do you have the picture, Bryce? Hang on. We take 3 steps, and this huge, I'm talking probably 20, 30 feet up, not this little, 20, 30 feet up. There's 15 of those coconuts. They fall literally a foot, 2 feet in front of us. Crashed. Coconuts are flying everywhere, and we didn't even know what to say. We didn't know whether to laugh or to thank God we're not in the hospital. It was insane to the point where people heard this huge crash. We had these 2 guys, they ran over to check on us. They're like, is everything okay? And we're just staring at each other. And we're looking, we're like, and then you always try to make something spiritual out of it. Like, what is God saying to us? Look out for coconuts. So this has nothing to do with the message, but the point is, I keep hearing about all this snow and shoveling snows, but we're fighting off black bears and dodging coconuts in Naples. So we have our own set of issues and, whatever. So we're on this series of Jonah. If you missed it last week, we started it. And we're going to learn how to meditate on portions of the scripture instead of burning through. We could read Jonah, I've heard that story. I've heard about the big fish. I heard about it's the kid's story. But actually, it's pretty cool because in Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 28, but Jesus actually quotes Jonah. he quotes the story of Jonah, and he's kind of getting on to these guys going, you want this miracle, this sign, I'll give you a sign. And so he quotes the story of Jonah. And to me, for those of you that are struggling, because I've heard some comments of I just thought that was a kid's story. No. Yeah, it's a kid's story, but it's a grown-up story too. And we can learn so much. I've been learning so much from Jonah's life and how I can identify with him. And but I think that just gives validation for anybody that's struggling, that Jesus uses this story as a real story and he quotes it. So that's pretty cool. So last week we learned about Jonah, how he gets this word from the Lord, and he tells him to go to Nineveh, this horrendous city, and he doesn't want to. He knows that the people could repent and God would forgive them, and he had no interest in doing that. So I think probably for one of the first times in his life, I think, that he ran from God. Because his life had been pretty comfortable. God hadn't challenged him on a level where it rocked his world. He hasn't been out of his comfort zone. So we talked about that last week. And how, who remembers the word that I gave you guys to chew on this week? Trust me. I hope you guys did that. I hope you put it on your bathroom wall or on your mirror, or just through this whole story. That's kind of what weaves in Jesus and trust me. So I hope that you guys keep that in mind. So we're going to jump in. So Jonah leaves, he flees, he finds the boat. Remember we talked about there's always going to be a boat waiting. And it can appear to be, oh, wow, God provided this boat. This is the way I was fleeing from God. He agrees with me. Remember what we talked about? There's always going to be a boat waiting for you to go the opposite direction God's calling you. So Jonah gets in this boat. And this is where we are going to pick up in verse 4. Jonah chapter 1, verse 4. Then the Lord sent a great wind. Okay, didn't come out of, wasn't just a storm that was slightly brewing. This God sent this storm. Almost like that word is just kind of like God was like, whoosh. It's a quick boom out of the blue. This was not your typical storm. The Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break. That kind of means the ship itself, they're kind of playing off of it, but the ship itself was scared. All the sailors were afraid. And these are not sailors, this isn't their first outing. These sailors, this is what they did for a living. They've been in some of the baddest storms. They've endured a lot of things. These aren't sailors that are just going to get rattled. It's like if you're a doctor and you work in the ER and someone's coming in and they've got blood everywhere, that's going to be it's going to be normal for you. Whatever profession, you're seeing these things all the time. They've faced many a storms. But for some reason, there was something different about this storm and they knew it. This was a supernatural storm. They were afraid and each cried out to its own God. These were pagans. They didn't worship the Lord. They worshiped their own gods. They didn't have faith. So all they knew to do was, let's cry out and ask our different gods to intervene here. Have an intervention, but that didn't work. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. They're so desperate, they're tossing things overboard. They're like, they don't know what to do. So they're tossing everything off the ship. But this is classic. But Jonah had gone below deck where he laid down and fell into a deep sleep. This, when you research this deep sleep, it almost has the sense of snoring. Like he's cutting logs in the middle of this. And if you've ever been around someone who snores, I'm not going to name any names, but my husband snores. I snore too. But the older you get, I think it's just something that we all just I don't know what it is, but with age, it comes with age. So if you're young, you're going to be snoring too shortly. So he falls into such a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? They're getting tossed around. The waves are crazy. I mean, this is not your average storm. This is like a massive, massive storm." The captain's so confused. "How in the world, Jonah? How in the world can you be sleeping through this? How in the world?" I want to show you this clip. And this wasn't, obviously we don't have the clip of what it actually looked like. But Bryce, if you have that clip ready, this would be something similar. Jonah's sleeping in that. What's going on? And it can really appear that God's kind of mean. You can kind of look at that and go, God sent that storm. And what kind of God would do that? We do that a lot in our life. What kind of God would allow me to go through this? But see, what you got to get here is, this is your first point if you're following along, is storms remind us that God never gives up on us. And it's not how we see that. It's not how we view storms in our lives. But this is God not giving up on Jonah. He's having an intervention in Jonah's life. And sometimes the interventions come through storms. I remember when I was, into my senior year, and I definitely wasn't following God, and I found myself pregnant at barely 18. And it ruined my life. I mean, it came out of nowhere. It wasn't planned. I was an embarrassment. And back then, the church that I was from we were just getting out of a lot of legalism, and it wasn't a welcoming of the prodigals church. So I had shame on me, and I just thought, my life is ruined. Can't go to college. I'm not supposed to play basketball in college. I can't. My life is, God is punishing me. He's punishing me. And that's how I felt in the moment. God sent my life a storm. But looking back, God sent me an intervention. And he sent me something that was going to change my world for the better for the rest of my life. Something that was going to give me purpose, because I had, like Jonah, I had fled from the Lord. Not that, and we'll see here in a second, it's not that I deny God. It's not that Jonah it's not that you deny God. It's that you leave his presence. And so God, the things that we can view as storms in our lives is God being a God of grace, going, no, you're my kid. And I know what path this is going to lead you down. And you're away from my presence, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you back to being in my presence. So storms can feel like that, and we can respond as kids. It's like, have you ever tried to ground your child? It's exhausting. And it's like, even though you're trying to just teach them that they can't act that way, or, you can't just punch your brother in the face. You're in trouble. It's like, but he said, that there's always a reason why we do. She started it. And then it's like, so you try to say, okay, but now I'm going to take this away, or however you punish. But they look at you like, and they say the meanest things, and they do that, like, I hate you. I hate you. You're ruining my life. Tell me if you're a parent, you haven't heard that. You don't even understand me. I didn't do anything. You're so mean. It's like, but you just want to say, nobody loves you more than me. But you have to learn. How are you going to learn? I love you enough. I'm not going to give you're 12 years old. You ask for the keys to the car. It ain't happening. That's a good parent. And God's a good God. Now, this story is all about, we know it as the big fish or the whale, the big fish or the whale. It's about a big God. That's what this story is about, a big God who loves Jonah enough. So we're going to look at, let's keep reading. So Jonah's asleep. The captain comes running in, calls him out, get up and call on your God, because our gods aren't doing a darn thing. Maybe he will take notice of us and we will not perish. I mean, they're talking about dying here. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out, which is just a pagan way that they did things that God actually used to put the blame on Jonah. But to find out who is responsible for this craziness. They cast lots, and of course, the lot fell on Jonah, verse 8. So they asked him, tell us who is responsible for making all this trouble for us. What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? What's your occupation? Like, who are you? They want to know, why, man, you've got to be someone important here. You have to have an important God that this could be happening. Then Jonah answers, verse 9, I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord. And that's what I was talking about. He's not denying the Lord. He's running from the Lord's presence. There's a difference. He's still saying that I believe in God. But God's not going to tell me to do something I don't want to do. He says, I worship the Lord, the God of the heaven, who made the sea and the land, and who made this storm. This terrified them. They asked, oh, what have you done to piss God off so bad? These people who don't even know the Lord, they're going, man, what have you done? Because that's how the world views it. Like, you make God mad. God's a mean God, and you're getting punished for this. Because you did this thing wrong, you're getting punished for this. It's the world's view. But our view, if you have any understanding of God, he's intervening here. This is an intervention to Jonah's life. He's wooing him back. He's like, no, man, I love you too much. So they're like, what have you done? Verse 11, the sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down? And this line is from Jonah. Pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Most of you guys there's a story in the New Testament. We probably don't have time to get in it, but Matthew 8:23, where the disciples are on the boat with Jesus, and there's a same type of situation. A huge storm just comes. And the disciples start freaking out. And they're like, "Why? Oh my gosh, we're going to die." And Jesus is sleeping through the storm. And the disciples run down there and like, how can you be sleeping? Don't you care about us? We're getting ready to die. And so the Lord gets up and he's like, oh, come on. Where's your faith, guys? You're with Jesus. And he talks to the storm and it's calm. So there's a difference between false rest. Jonah's sleeping here, cutting logs. He's not sleeping because he has the peace of God in his life. He's sleeping because he's exhausted and he's in despair. That's your second point. Without his presence, we have despair. He says that's his answer. He just told these guys, I worship the God who created this storm. And what should we do? You would think, come on, Jonah, are you that stubborn? Yes, and so are y'all. So am I. We are so stubborn. He says, instead of saying, Lord, I'm sorry. Lord, please forgive me. I need you. I get it. I get it, Lord. He says, just throw me over. It's that exhaustion. It's this, shame and guilt. It's not a sleep that Jesus was sleeping, of peace and rest. It's a sleep of like, I've been there. I've battled with depression. I've been in those moments where you're sleeping and you're like, even literally sleeping. And the kids come in and they're like, can we make a rainbow on the living room wall? And you're like so exhausted. You're like, yeah, that's fine. Just shut the door. Just leave me alone. Just despair and exhaustion, and you just don't care. That's what happens when we leave the presence of God. Despair comes in our life. And then what follows it shortly after is shame and guilt. Shame and guilt, and they can rule us. Is that true? Shame and guilt will rule us. We deal with it all the time. It's what blocks us from intimacy in our marriages. It's what blocks us from real, true friendships. Being transparent and accountable. It's what blocks us. Is shame and guilt. They can rule our life. But it's that's the enemy. That's the enemy's weapon towards us. Because if you know anything about God, God is not trying to beat Jonah up. He's not trying to punish him. And the same for you. When you feel guilt and shame, it is never from the Lord. It's from the enemy. Because the Lord's voice is going to comfort and encourage. Even when he disciplines, even when he's got to correct, it's through encouragement. So this is where Jonah's at. And that's why he says, throw me overboard. He's gone from despair down to guilt and shame. Just throw me overboard. I'm done caring. So let's read on what happens. Pick me up, throw me into the sea. He replied, it'll be calm. I know it's my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land. But they could not. For the sea grew even wilder than before. The waves got even more intense when they started trying to head back in the boat. And this is your third point. He doesn't want the boat back. He's not interested in them paddling their little hearts to go back. We got to just go put the boat back into the dock, and this'll end. But God doesn't. He's not interested, and he doesn't want the boat back. He wants your heart back. He wants Jonah's heart back. That's what he wants. That's like, you can kick your bad habit, and you can give something, whatever it is. You give your bad habit you quit your bad habit. But you're walking around like a jerk. Like, that's not what God's interested in. You're miserable. He's not interested in just you giving him back. Oh, well, God thinks this is bad. I got to quit this. Here, you can have it back. If it doesn't come along with your heart, he's not even interested in having it. That's not what he's after, is rules and laws. He wants your heart. He wants your heart. And if you're writing your tie checking it and you're like, oh gosh, this is so annoying. What do they even do with the money? And blah, 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 blah. Here, take the tie. Keep it. Keep it. Because if it doesn't come out of trust, God, this hurts. That's good if it hurts. This hurts, but I trust you. I'm going to be a joyful, because he wants joyful givers. He's not interested in the thing you're doing. He's interested in your condition of your heart. Do you have the presence of the Lord in your heart, in your life? So let's finish up and let's see what happens here in the story. They couldn't row back. It got even worse. Verse 14. Then they cried out to the Lord, Lord, please do not let us. They're crying out to the Lord. They don't even know the Lord. This is a perfect example of how God can use our failures in life to help other people find faith. I love this part because the sailors convert here. They're not praying to pagan gods anymore. Now they're praying to Moses' God. Like, okay, forget these dumb gods that have never done anything in our life. We need the real deal here. So they say, oh Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life, but they don't know what else to do. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man for you. Oh Lord, have done as you please. Verse 15, then they took Jonah and they threw him overboard. And the raging seas grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord. And they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Made promises. Now, I don't know where they ended up. But to me, and you can debate, and it doesn't matter, but they made promises to the Lord. Jonah's disobedience led these people to find God. He can use our uglies, and he does, because it's about what he has in mind. And then I don't want to get into it, but we'll talk about it next week, is the whale. The Lord brings the whale, but I do want to write down, we'll skip a little bit because we won't get into the good stuff about swallowed but not forgotten will be our next week. But verse 7, just read this real quick. When my life was, basically that word means in despair. What does your translation say? Oh, you might not have this verse ready to go. That's okay. Anyways, when my life was in despair, this is Jonah talking. He's in the belly of the whale. I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. He got low enough, and I don't want to get into it, we'll talk about it next week, but he got low enough, he got far enough away from the Lord's presence to where he was in such despair. He just wanted to die. And then he remembered the Lord. He remembered the Lord. He remembered about God and his presence. And sometimes we get in these places where we're so full of yuck and we don't even know how we got there. I can help you out. It's because we ran, maybe not even intentionally, but we ran from the Lord's presence. That's your fourth point. Is stop running from and start running to his presence. And Moses, in one of the first speeches about the presence of the Lord in Moses, I won't get into the whole story, but basically they built that big golden calf and they're worshiping God's people are worshiping this golden calf, and God just is like, oh, I'm kind of over this. So, just go ahead and take them on to the promised land. And Moses says, absolutely not. Not without you. Because God's saying go, but I'm not going with you. And Moses puts his feet down and he's like, I'm not going without your presence. What separates us? How are we your people without your presence? Because that's the only thing that separates us from anything else in this world, is his presence in our life. His presence brings those things, those hope, peace, joy, forgiveness, that his presence comes with every good thing that we have. So stop, even if you're not intentionally doing it, stop running away from his presence and run to his presence. We need his presence. Be a Moses and say, I won't do it. Not without your presence. Not without your presence, Lord.